In this video segment, we are going to discuss acid-base theories. This information is found in section 11.2 of chapter 11 on acids and bases. The two acid-base theories we're going to focus on right now is the Arrhenius theory and the Bronsted-Lowry theory. The Arrhenius theory is an earlier theory of acids and bases. Arrhenius defined an acid as a substance that dissociates or splits apart to produce hydrogen ions in water solutions. So illustrating an Arrhenius acid, we have hydrochloric acid dissolved in water. We remember that hydrochloric acid is a strong electrolyte. It's a strong acid. It completely dissociates to produce hydrogen ions as well as chloride ions in water solutions. And it's the presence of the hydrogen ion that carries the acidic properties of the solution. In other words, properties such as acids taste sour, acids turn phenolphthalein colorless, acids turn litmus red. These sorts of acidic properties are due to the presence of hydrogen ions in solution. So acidic solutions contain an excess of hydrogen ions. The hydrogen ion concentration of the solution is greater than the hydroxide. And just a note here that when I put hydrogen ions in bracket, that bracketing refers to the molar concentration of the hydrogen ions. An Arrhenius base is a substance that dissociates to produce hydroxide ions in water solutions. So we have been working with the notion that if you look at the formula of a substance and identify that that substance contains hydroxide ions, that is an indication that this substance is a base. So potassium hydroxide, a strong base. If you dissolve it in water, it will completely split apart to form potassium ions and hydroxide ions in water solution. And it's the presence of the hydroxide ion that carries the basic properties we described about solutions. They taste bitter, they feel soapy, they turn litmus blue, they turn phenolphthalein pink, right? These properties are the result of hydroxide ion being present in solution. So basic solutions contain an excess of hydroxide ions. The molar concentration of hydroxide ion is greater than the molar concentration of hydrogen ions in basic solutions. So the Arrhenius theory, the earliest theory of what an acid and a base is, but somewhat limited in its scope. We then have the Bronsted-Lowry theory of acids and bases, which expands our understanding of what an acid and a base is. Both these scientists deserve credit for the development of this theory, but sometimes you will see the Bronsted-Lowry theory simply reduced to Bronsted theory, referring to the same set of ideas. So the Bronsted-Lowry theory, a broader scope of what an acid and a base is. A Bronsted acid would be a substance that gives up or donates a hydrogen ion. This is sometimes more succinctly stated that a Bronsted acid is a proton donor. Why proton? Because structurally, the majority of hydrogen ions just consist of a single proton. They've lost their single electron and they consist of only one proton. So a Bronsted acid, a substance that gives up or donates hydrogen ion, a hydrogen ion, or you could say it gives up or donates a proton. Here is an example of a Bronsted acid. Notice I'm using the same acid that I discussed with the Arrhenius theory, but now we're getting a broader scope of why hydrochloric acid is an acid. Notice that outside of water, it exists as a gas and is referred to as hydrogen chloride. But when you dissolve or mix hydrogen chloride gas into water, the hydrogen chloride acts like a Bronsted acid, and it donates a hydrogen ion to water. In the process of donating a hydrogen ion to water, the hydronium ion is formed. That's what you get when water accepts a hydrogen ion. The hydrogen chloride, once it gives up a hydrogen ion, what's left of it is chloride ion. So HCl, a strong acid, completely dissociating in water, completely donating its hydrogen ion to water to form the hydronium ion and the chloride ion. Now I've given you here to the side a little bit of a development of the hydronium ion. Just looking at its Lewis dot structure, we have water accepting the hydrogen ion. The oxygen end of water is, sorry, let's get that written correctly. The oxygen end of water is partially negative and will attract the hydrogen ion. You form a chemical bond with a +1 charge. Because the hydrogen ion is +1 charge, we have the hydronium ion, H3O, with a +1 charge. Please note, you'll see me do this for simplicity often, that the hydronium ion has the formula H3O+, but often for simplicity, it's just represented as the hydrogen ion with a plus charge. Right, so hydronium ion aqueous, synonymous or equivalent to the hydrogen ion aqueous. A Bronsted base would be a substance that accepts a hydrogen ion, or it is a proton acceptor. So Bronsted acid, a hydrogen ion donor, a proton donor, it gives up a hydrogen ion. A Bronsted base is a substance that accepts a hydrogen ion. It is a proton acceptor. With that definition in mind, we can go back to this equation that we just wrote and identify water as acting as the Bronsted base, accepting the hydrogen ion from hydrogen chloride. Let's take another example, or look at another example of a Bronsted base. This time ammonia, which is a gas outside of water. But if you take ammonia and dissolve it into water, this time ammonia is acting as the Bronsted base and water is acting as the Bronsted acid, meaning that water is giving up or donating a hydrogen ion to ammonia, specifically attracting to that lone electron pair on the nitrogen atom of ammonia. So the hydrogen ion is given up by water, it acts as the Bronsted acid, ammonia accepts the hydrogen ion, specifically that lone electron pair on nitrogen is the attractor for the hydrogen ion. When this process takes place, we are forming the ammonium ion. When ammonia accepts an additional hydrogen ion, its formula is now NH4+. And when water gives up a hydrogen ion, what's left of it is the hydroxide ion. Now notice ammonia is a weak base. So you see that I have arrows in both directions, meaning that ammonia is only partially ionizing to form the ammonium ion. Only partially, only some of the ammonia molecules act to accept the hydrogen ion from water. So this is a reversible process, and the equilibrium in fact lies to the left, meaning that when you look at this system, you have more neutral ammonia molecules and water molecules than you have ions in solution, ammonium ion and hydroxide. One other point that I should mention here, that up to this point in this class, we have been talking about ammonium hydroxide as a weak base, and now we can see that ammonium hydroxide is actually what is produced when ammonia is acting as a weak base. So the real weak base that we can now look at, because we understand Bronsted-Lowry acid-base theory, the real weak base is ammonia. And ammonium hydroxide is a simplification construct representing ammonia until we could get to this point in the lecture and fully understand how ammonia is able to act as a weak base. One last thing I should mention before I move to the next topic. This is curious for students, sometimes puzzling, because they see that I have written water acting as a base when it is in the presence of hydrogen chloride, but then I show water acting like an acid when it is in the presence of ammonia. So students ask me, what is water? Is it an acid or is it a base? This is confusing. And the answer is yes. Water can act as both an acid or a base depending on what it is in the presence of. And we have a term for that, and that term is called amphoteric, a substance that is capable of acting like both an acid or a base depending on what it's paired with, either an acid or a base. So when water is in the presence of something more acidic than it is, that wants to donate a hydrogen ion more than it does, water acts like a base. But if you mix water with a substance that is more basic than it is, that wants to accept a hydrogen ion more than it does, water can act like an acid. Right? So amphoteric, a substance that is capable of acting like both an acid and a base. Depending on what it is in the presence of, it will act as either one or the other. The last thing I want to discuss is conjugate acid-base pairs. This is an important concept to understand buffers and how they work. When an acid acts to donate a hydrogen ion, it produces its conjugate base, and vice versa. When a base acts to accept a hydrogen ion, it produces its conjugate acid. And we refer to this pair as a conjugate acid-base pair. Illustrating, here is hydrogen chloride, here is ammonia, both gases outside of water. You can have Bronsted acid-base theory happening with no water present at all. Notice that the Arrhenius theory, his ideas were limited by and large to aqueous systems. But here we have hydrogen chloride and ammonia present together in the gas phase. Hydrogen chloride acts like an acid and donates a hydrogen ion to ammonia, which is acting as the Bronsted base. When hydrogen chloride acts like an acid and gives up its hydrogen ion, what's left of its structure chemically is the chloride ion, which by definition should be able to, if this process went in the reverse direction, chloride should be able to accept a hydrogen ion and reform hydrogen chloride. So chloride would be the conjugate base of the acid hydrogen chloride. Likewise, ammonia is acting like the base, accepting the hydrogen ion from hydrogen chloride. When it does that, it produces the ammonium ion, which, if this reaction went in the reverse direction, would be giving up a hydrogen ion to chloride, acting like an acid. So the arrows here are identifying the conjugate acid-base pairs. HCl is the acid, and chloride ion its conjugate base. So HCl chloride conjugate acid-base pair. And likewise, ammonia, ammonium ion, conjugate acid-base pair. So ammonia, ammonium ion, conjugate acid-base pair. We can see here that structurally, conjugate acid-base pairs differ only by the presence or absence of a single hydrogen ion. Both these conjugate pairs, if you look at their formulas, they differ only by the presence or absence of one hydrogen ion. The second important thing to note about conjugate acid-base pairs is that the stronger an acid is as an acid, meaning the more readily it donates its hydrogen ion, the weaker its conjugate base must be as a base. And then its conjugate base must not have any real tendency to accept that hydrogen ion. If the acid donates readily its hydrogen ion, by definition, its conjugate base does not act very well as a base to accept that hydrogen ion in the reverse process. So we understand that HCl is a strong acid. So that must mean that the chloride ion has no real ability to act like a base. And in fact, the reverse tendency for this reaction is negligible. Chloride having no real ability to act like a base. Ammonia is a weak base, which means that the ammonium ion has some appreciable ability to act like an acid. We wouldn't call it a strong acid, but it has some measurable ability to act like an acid. Whereas the chloride ion, a terrible base, because its conjugate acid, HCl, is such a strong acid.